Hello, friends, and welcome back to Anonymous Diary. Today's story comes from the relationship subreddit. It was posted on February 14th, 2026, and was titled, "My boyfriend kept canceling our dates claiming work overtime. Then my best friend sent me photos of him with my sister at the same restaurant where we had our first date." If you enjoy these type of videos, do drop a like and comment how you feel about this scenario. I love hearing your opinions on these dilemmas. Now let's get started.
I never thought the two people I trusted most in the world would betray me in such a calculated way. My name is Olivia, I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my boyfriend of 3 years and my younger sister conspired behind my back, lied to my face repeatedly, and how I eventually exposed their deception in a way that left them both scrambling for excuses. I met Ethan when I was 25 at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me beyond surface-level small talk. We hit it off immediately and started dating within weeks. For the first 2 years, our relationship was everything I had hoped for. He was attentive, supportive of my career as a graphic designer, and integrated seamlessly into my family. My sister Chloe is 2 years younger than me. Growing up, we had a complicated relationship marked by competition that our parents unfortunately encouraged. Chloe was the athletic one, while I was the academic achiever and the quiet creative type. Our parents constantly compared us, though they tried to frame it as motivation. The dynamic created tension between us, but I thought we had moved past that as adults. When I introduced Ethan to my family about 6 months into our relationship, Chloe seemed happy for me. She was single at the time, having recently broken up with her long-term boyfriend. She and Ethan got along well, which I appreciated because family harmony was important to me. They would chat at family dinners, joke around, and seem to have a friendly rapport. I never thought twice about it. The problem started about 6 months ago. Ethan began canceling our date nights at the last minute, always with work-related excuses. He was a project manager at a tech startup, so occasional overtime wasn't unusual. But the frequency increased from once a month to twice a week. When I suggested we plan dates further in advance so he could block off the time, he would agree enthusiastically, but then still cancel. I also noticed that Chloe had become less available for our weekly sister lunches. We had maintained this tradition for years, even during her relationship with her ex. Suddenly, she was always busy with work projects, friend commitments, or vague personal errands. When we did meet up, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and cutting our time together short. The first real red flag came when I surprised Ethan at his apartment one Friday evening. We had plans for dinner, but he had texted saying he needed to work late and would have to reschedule. I decided to bring takeout to his place so we could at least eat together. When I arrived, his car wasn't in its usual spot, and his apartment was dark. I called him, and he answered sounding flustered, saying he was still at the office and would be there for hours. Something about his tone felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. I left the food with his neighbor and went home, trying not to feel hurt by the wasted effort. That night, I couldn't sleep. The nagging doubt kept growing. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked the location history on the shared calendar app we used. We had added each other's locations years ago for practical reasons, like coordinating pickups or knowing when the other was on their way home. His location history showed that on the night he claimed to be working late, his phone had been in at a bar called the Meridian across town, not his office. I felt my stomach drop. I told myself there could be an explanation, maybe a work happy hour, maybe he had stopped by to meet a friend. I didn't confront him immediately because I wanted to gather more information before jumping to conclusions. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I noticed patterns. Ethan would cancel plans on Wednesday evenings and Friday nights specifically. His location would show him at various restaurants and bars, never the same place twice. Meanwhile, Chloe was also mysteriously busy on those same evenings. I still didn't want to believe what seemed increasingly obvious. My boyfriend and my sister? It seemed too cliché, too cruel. But the evidence kept mounting. I noticed that Chloe had started wearing perfume that smelled expensive and unfamiliar. She had new clothes that seemed beyond her budget as a dental hygienist. She was secretive about her phone in a way she had never been before. The breaking point came when my best friend Jenna called me one evening, her voice careful and concerned. She said she needed to tell me something but wanted to do it in person. We met for coffee the next day, and she pulled out her phone with obvious reluctance. She showed me photos she had taken 3 nights earlier. The photo showed Ethan and Chloe at Rosario's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. The same restaurant where Ethan had taken me for our first official date. They were sitting close together in a booth, laughing. In one photo, his hand was on her knee. In another, they were leaning toward each other in a way that left no doubt about the romantic nature of the meeting. Jenna explained that she had been there for a work dinner and spotted them by accident. She had debated for days about whether to tell me, ultimately deciding that I deserved to know. I thanked her through tears and asked her to send me the photos. She did, along with a tight hug and an offer to stay with her if I needed space from everything. I went home and looked at those photos for hours. The betrayal wasn't just that Ethan was cheating. It was that he was doing it with my sister. It was that they were going to places that held significance for me and him. It was that they both looked so happy, so carefree, while they were destroying my trust and my family relationships. I made a decision that night. I wouldn't confront them immediately. Instead, I would gather irrefutable proof and create a situation where they couldn't lie or make excuses. I needed them to know that I knew, and I needed them to face consequences for their choices. Over the next week, I documented everything. I screenshotted Ethan's location history. I noted every canceled plan with timestamps. I saved Jenna's photos. I also started checking our shared credit card statement, which I rarely looked at since we split finances carefully. That's when I discovered that Ethan had been using our joint card to pay for these dinners with Chloe. My own money had been funding their affair. I felt sick seeing the charges. Expensive restaurants, bars, even a weekend hotel stay in the neighboring city that coincided with a weekend Ethan told me he was visiting his parents. I had helped pay for him to cheat on me with my sister. I also set up a small test. I told Ethan I wanted to plan something special for our upcoming 3-year anniversary. He seemed enthusiastic and asked what I had in mind. I suggested we go to Rosario's, watching his face carefully when I said the name. He barely reacted, just agreed it would be nice. No guilt, no hesitation. That's when I knew he was practiced at this deception. With Chloe, I took a different approach. I asked her if she wanted to go shopping for our mother's upcoming birthday. She seemed uncomfortable and said she was busy. When I pressed for a specific day, she fumbled for excuses before finally agreeing to the following Wednesday. I already knew from Ethan's calendar that he had blocked that Wednesday evening for work obligations. The Wednesday came and Chloe and I spent the afternoon shopping. She was distracted and kept checking her phone. Around 5, she claimed she wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. I acted sympathetic and we parted ways. Then I drove to a coffee shop with a view of her apartment building and waited. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, she emerged wearing a different outfit, makeup done, hair styled. She got in her car and drove across town. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding. She pulled up to a wine bar called Vino Veritas. 10 minutes later, Ethan's car arrived and I watched him walk inside. I sat in my car for 15 minutes, gathering my courage. Then I walked into the wine bar. It was dimly lit with intimate booth seating. I spotted them immediately, tucked in a corner booth, their heads closed together in conversation. I approached their table before either of them noticed me. The look on their faces when they saw me is something I will never forget. Tear panic. Chloe went pale, and Ethan stood up so quickly he knocked over his wine glass. I calmly sat down in the booth across from them and said I wanted to talk. Ethan immediately went into damage control mode. He said I was misunderstanding the situation, that he and Chloe had run into each other by chance and were just catching up. Chloe nodded along, saying she had been feeling stressed lately and had reached out to Ethan for advice on a work issue since he was in a similar field. I let them talk, watching their desperate attempts to spin an innocent narrative. When they finished, I pulled out my phone. I showed them the photos Jenna had taken at Rosario's. I showed them screenshots of Ethan's location history. I showed them the credit card statements with dozens of charges at restaurants and bars across the city. The lies stopped. Ethan slunk back in his seat, looking defeated. Chloe started crying, saying she was so sorry, that it had just happened and she never meant to hurt me. I felt nothing but cold anger as I listened to her sob. I told them both exactly what I thought of them. I told Ethan that we were done, that I wanted him out of my apartment by the end of the week, and that I would be canceling our joint credit card immediately. I told Chloe that she had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and that I wanted nothing to do with her. Then I stood up and walked out of the wine bar, leaving them sitting there in shock. I drove straight to Jenna's apartment and finally allowed myself to break down. She held me while I cried, validating my anger and hurt without trying to minimize it. The fallout was immediate and messy.
Anonymous thoughts. Okay, so Olivia. Where do I even start with this one? Because this story has so many layers. It is genuinely giving me a whole onion situation, and every single layer just makes me want to scream louder than the last one. Let's establish the cast first. We have Ethan, the boyfriend of 3 years, charming and attentive, lovely, integrated into the family, keyword integrated because oh boy did he integrate. We have Chloe, the younger sister, the one Olivia specifically said she thought they had moved past the childhood rivalry with. And we have Jenna, the real one, the best friend who saw something horrible and made the painful decision to tell the truth anyway. Jenna deserves a medal, a holiday, and a gift basket. Now Ethan canceling plans once in a while. Fine. Project managers at startups do work late, I will give him that much. But twice a week, every Wednesday and every Friday, like clockwork, with his location showing bars and restaurants across town, that is not overtime. That is a social calendar. That man had a whole second life running with the precision of a Swiss watch while Olivia was at home pushing down her gut feeling and trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. The audacity of being that organized about your betrayal is actually staggering to me. But here is where this story shifts from painful to genuinely sickening. It is not just that Ethan was cheating. It is who he was doing it with, her sister, her actual blood, the person she grew up with, the person her parents compared her to, the person she had weekly lunches with for years. Chloe looked her sister in the eye every single week and kept this secret. She sat across from Olivia at those lunches, distracted and checking her phone, probably texting Ethan, and still said nothing. That is not a mistake. That is a sustained, deliberate, months-long campaign of deception against someone who loved and trusted her. And then Rosario's, the restaurant where Olivia and Ethan had their first date. They went there. Of all the restaurants in the entire city, they chose that one. I do not think that was accidental, and that is the part that disturbs me most. There is something deeply cruel about that choice, whether they were conscious of it or not. That place held meaning for Olivia, and they made it into something else entirely. That is not just cheating, that is desecration. Morally speaking, Chloe carries more responsibility here in my opinion, and I say that seriously. Ethan is absolutely guilty. He was in a committed relationship, and he chose to destroy it. But Chloe is Olivia's family. The bond between sisters is supposed to be different to every other relationship in your life. The competitive dynamic they grew up with clearly never went away for Chloe. It just mutated into something far more destructive. Instead of competing over grades or athletics, she graduated to competing over her sister's partner. That is not growth. That is regression dressed up in expensive new clothes and unfamiliar perfume. What Olivia did in response, though, genuinely impressive. She did not spiral. She did not confront them immediately and give them the chance to gaslight her into thinking she was paranoid. She gathered 3 years' worth of location data, restaurant charges, timestamps, photographs, and then she walked into that wine bar calm as anything and sat down across from them like a woman who had already won. The look on their faces must have been extraordinary. Watching two people who had been lying so confidently suddenly realize that the entire floor had dropped out from under them. That is not a breakdown, that is a masterclass. The joint credit card detail is the part that genuinely made my jaw drop. Olivia was unknowingly funding her own betrayal. Her money paid for their dinners. Her money potentially paid for that hotel weekend that Ethan wrote off as visiting his parents. She was financing the affair that was destroying her. That is so far beyond disrespectful it does not even have a word. Jenna is the quiet hero of this whole story. She was at a work dinner, spotted something awful, sat with that knowledge for days, and then chose her friendship over her own comfort. She did not let Olivia walk around unknowing just because the conversation was going to be devastating. That is what real loyalty looks like, and the contrast between Jenna and Chloe could not be more stark. Olivia, for what it is worth, handled this with more dignity than most people could manage. She was hurt, she was betrayed by two people at the same time, and she still walked out of that wine bar with her head up.
Update 1. Ethan called and texted repeatedly, alternating between apologies and attempts to explain himself. I blocked his number. He showed up at my apartment, but I refused to let him in. He left his key in the mailbox and moved his things out over the following days when I made sure to be elsewhere. Chloe's attempts to reach me were more persistent. She called, texted, sent emails, and even showed up at my workplace. I refused all contact. She tried to explain that she and Ethan had fallen in love, that it wasn't something they planned, that feelings just developed over time. This explanation only made me angrier. It meant their betrayal wasn't a one-time mistake, but a sustained, deliberate choice. The most difficult part was dealing with my parents. My mother called me in tears after Chloe told her what happened. Instead of being angry at Chloe for the betrayal, my mother was upset with me for cutting Chloe off. She said that Chloe was going through a hard time, that she was genuinely in love with Ethan, and that I should be understanding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother was asking me to forgive my sister for having an affair with my boyfriend because she was having feelings. When I pointed out the cruelty and deception involved, my mother said that sometimes people can't help who they fall in love with, and that family should stick together no matter what. My father was more sympathetic, but still urged me to eventually forgive Chloe because she was my sister. He said that years from now, I would regret losing my sister over a relationship that might not have lasted anyway. I told him that Chloe had made the choice that destroyed our relationship, not me. It's been 4 months since I discovered the affair and confronted Ethan and Chloe at that wine bar. The aftermath has been more complicated than I ever imagined, with family dynamics fracturing in ways that have forced me to reevaluate relationships I thought were solid. In the weeks immediately following the confrontation, I focused on rebuilding my life without Ethan. I threw myself into work, taking on additional freelance projects that kept me busy and distracted. I started therapy to process the betrayal and the complicated feelings of grief, anger, and relief that came in waves. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't just mourning the relationship with Ethan, but also the loss of the sister relationship I thought I had. Ethan made several more attempts to contact me through mutual friends. He sent a long email about 2 weeks after our breakup, claiming that his relationship with Chloe had started innocently and that he had fought his feelings for months before acting on them. He said he never meant to hurt me and that he hoped I could understand that sometimes love happens in unexpected ways. The email infuriated me because it framed their affair as some romantic inevitability rather than a series of selfish choices. I drafted a response pointing out that love doesn't make you lie for months, use shared money to fund dates with someone else, or gaslight your partner when they express concern. I explained that if he had actually developed feelings for my sister, the decent thing would have been to end our relationship before pursuing her. But I never sent the email. He didn't deserve my time or energy, and explaining basic decency to a grown man felt pointless. Chloe's attempts to reconcile were more aggressive and emotionally manipulative. She showed up at my apartment complex multiple times until I had the building manager tell her she wasn't welcome. She sent letters that alternated between cheerful apologies and justifications for her behavior. In one particularly infuriating letter, she wrote that she had always felt inferior to me, that I had always been the favored daughter, and that for once she wanted something that was mine. That letter revealed what I had suspected. Her affair with Ethan wasn't about love, it was about competition. It was about taking something from me to feel like she had won whatever game she thought we were playing. When I showed the letter to my therapist, she helped me see that Chloe's issues with jealousy and comparison went far deeper than I had realized and weren't something I could fix. My parents' response continued to be the most disappointing aspect of the situation. My mother became increasingly insistent that I needed to forgive Chloe. She would call me crying, saying that our family was falling apart and I had the power to fix it by just talking to my sister. When I explained that I was the victim of Chloe's betrayal, not the perpetrator of family drama, my mother would say things like everyone makes mistakes and family is forever. The situation came to a head at my mother's birthday dinner 6 weeks after the confrontation. My parents had invited both Chloe and me, apparently hoping we would reconcile in the spirit of family celebration. I made it clear I wouldn't attend if Chloe was there. My mother begged me to come anyway, promising it wouldn't be awkward. I should have trusted my instincts and stayed home. When I arrived at the restaurant, Chloe was already there, seated next to our mother. Worse, Ethan was there too, sitting next to Chloe with his arm around her chair. I stopped in my tracks, feeling ambushed and betrayed all over again. My mother stood up quickly asking me to please stay, to please try to get along for just one evening. My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I looked at Chloe and Ethan, who had the audacity to look hopeful, like I might actually sit down and break bread with them. I turned to my mother and asked her directly if she understood what she was asking me to do. She said she was asking me to be the bigger person and put family first. I told her that Chloe and Ethan had put themselves first when they started their affair. I said that being the bigger person didn't mean accepting disrespect and betrayal. Then I left. I went home, blocked my mother's number temporarily, and spent the evening with Jenna and her girlfriend, who reminded me that choosing self-respect over forced family harmony was not only acceptable but necessary. The next day, my father called. He apologized for the ambush at the dinner, admitting that he had told my mother it was a bad idea but she had insisted. He said he understood why I was hurt, and that he didn't expect me to forgive Chloe on anyone else's timeline. It wasn't a full validation of my position, but it was something. What my father told me next was surprising. He said that Chloe and Ethan's relationship was already showing cracks. Apparently, Ethan had expected that once I knew about them, they could transition into a normal public relationship. But Chloe was struggling with guilt and the reality that everyone in her life now knew she had betrayed her sister. Her friends had mostly distanced themselves from her, and extended family members were giving her the cold shoulder at gatherings. According to my father, Chloe had expected that once the truth was out, I would eventually forgive her, and we would all move forward as one big happy family. When that didn't happen, she realized she had traded her relationship with me, her friendships, and her reputation for a relationship with Ethan that was built on deception and built under terrible circumstances. My father also mentioned that my mother had been pressuring Chloe and Ethan to get engaged quickly, thinking that if they were serious and committed, I would have to accept the relationship. This information made me both angry and vindicated. My mother was so invested in the narrative that Chloe and Ethan were in true love that she was pushing them toward a commitment neither was ready for. Around this time, I started hearing from mutual friends about Chloe and Ethan's relationship troubles. They had been fighting publicly at social gatherings. Chloe had discovered that Ethan was still in contact with an ex-girlfriend, which sparked huge arguments about trust and honesty. The irony was not lost on anyone. One of Chloe's former friends, Madison, reached out to me to apologize. She said that Chloe had told her friend group that Ethan and I had broken up before anything happened between them. When Madison saw my social media posts indicating that I had found out about an affair, she realized Chloe had lied to all of them. Madison said several mutual friends felt the same way and wanted me to know they didn't condone what Chloe had done. These conversations were validating, but also sad. I had lost my sister and my boyfriend, but Chloe had lost much more. She had lost me, her friendships, her integrity, and was now in a relationship that everyone knew was founded on betrayal. Whatever she thought she was gaining by pursuing Ethan clearly wasn't worth what she had given up. About 3 months after the initial confrontation, Chloe reached out through my father, asking if I would be willing to meet with her one-on-one to talk. My father said she had something important to tell me and hoped I would hear her out. I was hesitant, but my therapist thought it might provide closure if I approached it with clear boundaries. I agreed to meet Chloe at a neutral location, a coffee shop across town where we had no history. I told her through my father that I would give her 30 minutes and that this didn't mean I was forgiving her or resuming our relationship. When I arrived, Chloe was already there, looking nervous and thinner than I remembered. She started by apologizing, though her apology was riddled with excuses. She said she had been in a dark place after her breakup, feeling lost and insecure. When Ethan started paying attention to her at family gatherings, it made her feel seen and valued. She claimed she tried to fight the attraction, but eventually gave in. I listened without interrupting, watching her try to paint herself as a victim of circumstances rather than someone who made deliberate choices. When she finished, I told her that I appreciated the apology, but that it didn't change anything. I explained that she hadn't just made a mistake, she had sustained a deception for months, lied to my face repeatedly, and showed no remorse until she faced social consequences. Chloe started crying and said she had broken up with Ethan. She said being with him felt wrong, that she couldn't be happy knowing she had destroyed our relationship for it. She said she hoped that with time and distance, maybe I could forgive her and we could rebuild our sisterly bond.
Okay, so this is part 2 of Olivia's story, and somehow it managed to be even more infuriating than the first part, which I genuinely did not think was possible. I thought we had reached peak betrayal, but no. There was an entire second act waiting, and it involves the parents, an ambush birthday dinner, and a letter from Chloe that is honestly one of the most self-incriminating things I have ever heard in my life. Let's start with the parents because this is where my blood pressure genuinely spiked. Olivia's mother found out her younger daughter had been conducting a months-long affair with her older daughter's boyfriend, lying to everyone's faces, using the family dynamic as cover, and her response was to call Olivia in tears asking her to be understanding. Understanding? Of what exactly? Of the fact that Chloe wanted something that belonged to her sister, so she just took it. The mother's logic of sometimes people can't help who they fall in love with is the kind of reasoning that sounds almost philosophical until you remember that it is being used to defend sustained, calculated deception against your own child. Falling in love does not require lying for months. Falling in love does not require using your sister's joint credit card to fund the affair. Those are choices, deliberate ones. And the father, who I had some sympathy for initially, also urging Olivia to eventually forgive Chloe because she might regret losing her sister over a relationship that might not have lasted anyway. Sir, SIR, the relationship not lasting is not the point. The betrayal is the point. The deception is the point. You do not get to minimize what Chloe did by speculating about Ethan's long-term relationship potential. But then comes the birthday dinner, and this is where I actually had to put my imaginary phone down for a second. Olivia's mother promised her it would be fine, begged her to come, and then seated Chloe and Ethan at the table, Ethan with his arm around Chloe's chair, looking hopeful like Olivia was going to sit down and toast to their new relationship. That is not a family dinner. That is an ambush with a birthday cake. The audacity of asking Olivia to be the bigger person in that specific moment, in that specific setting, surrounded by the two people who betrayed her, is genuinely breathtaking. Olivia was absolutely right to walk out, and I will not hear otherwise. Now Chloe's letter. Oh, the letter. She wrote that she had always felt inferior to Olivia, that she wanted something that was hers for once. I need everyone to sit with that for a moment because that sentence is a full confession. She did not pursue Ethan because she fell in love with him. She pursued him because he belonged to Olivia. The affair was never really about Ethan at all. It was about the childhood rivalry that Chloe never let go of, the competition their parents spent years quietly feeding, and Chloe deciding that her sister's relationship was just another trophy to chase. That is dark, genuinely dark, and it reframes the entire first part of the story in a deeply unsettling way. Morally, Chloe is the more culpable person here, and I stand by that. Ethan is guilty of cheating, full stop, no excuses, but Chloe weaponized a sisterhood. She used the access and trust that comes with being family to get close enough to cause maximum damage, and then she lied to her own friend group about it, telling them Ethan and Olivia had already broken up before anything happened. She constructed a false narrative for everyone around her, so she could keep being seen as a good person while doing a deeply bad thing. The irony of Chloe then discovering Ethan was still in contact with an ex and having massive arguments about trust is the kind of poetic justice that you genuinely could not write. The man she helped lie and deceive for months turned out to be someone she couldn't trust. Shocking, truly shocking. I am so surprised. Ethan did not suddenly become a loyal, honest person the moment he started a new relationship. He was always that person. Chloe just didn't think the behavior would ever be directed at her. And then the coffee shop meeting. Chloe showing up thinner, nervous, Ethan apparently now out of the picture, suddenly ready to apologize. But even the apology was wrapped in excuses. She was in a dark place. She felt lost. Ethan made her feel seen. Olivia, to her enormous credit, sat there, listened to all of it, and then calmly told Chloe that none of that changed anything, because it doesn't. Remorse that only arrives after social consequences, lost friendships, and a failed relationship is not really remorse. It is damage control with a sad face. Olivia did not owe Chloe that meeting. She did not owe her tears, and she absolutely does not owe her forgiveness on any timeline other than her own, if ever. Some bridges don't get rebuilt, and that is okay.
Update 2. I told Chloe honestly that I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, and that even if I did, our relationship would never be what it was. The trust was broken in a fundamental way. I said that if she truly wanted to make amends, she needed to stop making her guilt and desire for forgiveness my responsibility to manage. She needed to sit with the consequences of her actions without expecting me to absolve her. Chloe asked if there was anything she could do to earn my forgiveness. I told her that forgiveness wasn't something she could earn through actions or gestures. It was something I might eventually choose to give for my own peace of mind, not because she deserved it. She seemed to deflate at this response, realizing there was no clear path to fixing what she had broken. We ended the conversation with me telling her that I needed her to respect my boundaries and stop pushing for reconciliation through our parents or mutual friends. If I ever felt ready to have a relationship with her again, I would reach out. Until then, she needed to give me space. She agreed, though I could tell it wasn't the resolution she had hoped for. Since that conversation, Chloe has mostly respected my requests for space. My mother, however, has continued to push for reconciliation. She calls periodically to tell me that Chloe is struggling with depression, that she made a mistake but has learned from it, and that I'm being cruel by continuing to shut her out. These conversations have become a significant source of stress. My therapist has helped me practice setting boundaries with my mother, but it's exhausting to constantly defend my decision not to forgive someone who betrayed me. My mother seems incapable of understanding that her pressure is only making things worse and pushing me away from the entire family. My father has been more supportive, though he still hopes that eventually time will heal the rift. He doesn't pressure me the way my mother does, and for that I'm grateful. We've been able to maintain a relationship, though it's strained when he talks about family gatherings I choose not to attend because Chloe will be there. As for Ethan, I haven't heard from him directly since the email he sent weeks after our breakup. I've heard through mutual friends that he's dating someone new already, which doesn't surprise me. Someone who cheats and lies as easily as he did isn't likely to spend much time being single and reflective. The hardest part of all of this hasn't been losing Ethan, if I'm honest. It's been losing the family dynamic I thought I had. I grew up believing that family loyalty meant something, that blood ties created bonds that could weather any storm. But I've learned that family members can hurt you as deeply as anyone else, and that sometimes protecting yourself means creating distance from people who share your DNA. I've also learned that I can't control how other people perceive my choices. Some family members think I'm being too harsh on Chloe. Some friends think I should have given Ethan a second chance. But I've stopped trying to justify my decisions to people who don't understand the depth of the betrayal. My life now is quieter but more authentic. I'm dating someone new, taking it slow, and being careful with my trust. I've strengthened friendships with people who showed up for me during the worst of the fallout. I've set clearer boundaries with my family about what I will and won't tolerate. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Chloe or what our relationship will look like years from now. What I do know is that I deserve better than people who lie to my face while betraying me behind my back. And I refuse to sacrifice my self-respect to maintain a false sense of family harmony. The photos from that night at Rosario's are still on my phone, though I haven't looked at them in months. They serve as a reminder that trusting your instincts is important, that patterns of deception rarely have innocent explanations, and that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of hurting you most. I'm rebuilding my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who value honesty and loyalty. It's not the life I planned 4 months ago, but it's a life where I'm respected and valued. And that's worth more than maintaining relationships with people who prove they don't deserve my trust. The situation with my mother reached a breaking point last week. She called asking me to consider forgiving Chloe. But this time, she told me she was having health issues and that the stress of our family being divided was making her condition worse. She implied that if something happened to her, it would be my fault. I told her calmly that I was sorry about her health problems, but that her medical condition was not my responsibility to fix by forgiving someone who betrayed me. I explained that if family unity was so important, perhaps she should have held Chloe accountable instead of pressuring me. My mother said I had changed, that I used to be sweet and forgiving, and that this situation had made me cold. I told her I hadn't changed, I had simply learned to value myself enough not to accept mistreatment. Then I hung up. My father called an hour later. He had heard about the conversation from my mother. He gently suggested that maybe I was being harsh. I asked him why no one was ever concerned about being harsh with me. Why was I expected to be endlessly understanding while Chloe faced minimal consequences? My father went quiet before admitting he understood my point. He said he would talk to my mother about backing off. I appreciated the gesture, but doubted it would make much difference. About a week later, my grandmother on my father's side reached out. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us. Over lunch, she told me she had heard what happened and thought I was handling the situation with remarkable maturity. She said she was proud to see me standing up for myself. She also shared that, when my mother was younger, a close friend had pursued my father while they were dating. My mother had forgiven the friend, but according to my grandmother, it had eaten away at her for years. My grandmother believed my mother was projecting her own regrets onto my situation. This context helped me understand my mother's behavior better, though it didn't excuse it. My grandmother told me that forgiveness is a personal choice that should never be demanded or rushed. Meanwhile, I heard more about Chloe's situation. Apparently, her breakup with Ethan had been messy. He had accused her of being too needy and using him to get back at me. She had accused him of never really caring about her. Their arguments had become the talk of our social circle. One of my cousins told me Chloe had moved back in with our parents because she couldn't afford her apartment. She had been relying on Ethan to help with expenses. My cousin also mentioned that Chloe seemed depressed and rarely left the house except for work. Part of me felt satisfied hearing this. Chloe was finally experiencing consequences, but another part just felt sad that my sister had destroyed so much for a relationship that didn't even last. My new relationship has been a bright spot. His name is Adrian, and I met him through work. He's kind, straightforward, and patient as I work through trust issues. Adrian has met Jenna and my close friends, but I've been hesitant to introduce him to my family. He understands and is happy to wait. This patience is something I never got from Ethan. Last month, I started planning a move to a different city. There's a design firm opportunity 2 hours away. If I get the offer, I'll take it. When I mentioned this to my father, he seemed sad but understanding. My mother was upset and accused me of running away. I told her I wasn't running away, I was running toward a better life. I've also been thinking about what forgiveness means. My therapist explained that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing someone back into your life. It can simply mean releasing the anger. I'm not ready for that yet. The anger reminds me to maintain boundaries. Maybe someday I'll let it go while still keeping Chloe at a distance. What I've been able to do is focus on building a life that makes me happy. I've taken up painting again. I've been traveling more, taking weekend trips to places I've always wanted to see. I've invested in friendships that feed my soul. I've also become more selective about family events. I go to my grandmother's birthday and my father's retirement party. I skip Thanksgiving and Christmas at my parents' house. My mother sends guilt-laden texts, but I've learned to read them without internalizing the shame. The credit card Ethan and I shared has been closed, and I recovered the money he spent on dates with Chloe through small claims court. He didn't contest it. That money went toward my moving fund. I ran into Ethan once at a mutual friend's wedding. He looked uncomfortable and eventually offered an awkward apology. I responded politely but coldly. Later, I saw him watching me dance with Adrian, and I felt nothing. No anger, just indifference. That's when I knew I was moving on. Jenna recently asked if I thought Chloe and I would ever reconcile. I told her honestly that I didn't know. Maybe years from now, when the hurt isn't so fresh, we might have some cordial relationship. but we will never be sisters in the way we once were. What I do know is that I'm not going to sacrifice my healing to make other people comfortable. If that makes me the bad guy in my mother's narrative, I can live with that. I'd rather be the villain in someone else's story than the victim in my own. The photos Jenna took that night at Rosario's are still on my phone, buried in a folder I never look at. They serve as a reminder, trust actions, not words. Ethan and Chloe both told me they cared about me while actively betraying me. My story doesn't have a neat ending with reconciliations. Real life rarely works that way. What it has is me, choosing myself, building a life I'm proud of, and refusing to accept crumbs of respect from people who should have given me the whole cake. Chloe wanted what I had. In her jealousy, she took my boyfriend but lost her sister, her friends, and her integrity. I lost a boyfriend and a sister, but I gained clarity about who I am and what I deserve. When I look at it that way, I know who really won.
Okay, so we have reached part 3 of Olivia's story, and this is the part where I need everyone to take a deep breath because we are covering a lot of ground. We have guilt-tripping mothers, a grandmother plot twist, small claims court, a new man named Adrian, and one of the most satisfying closing lines I have ever heard in my life. Buckle up. Let's start with the coffee shop conversation, because Olivia said something in that meeting that I want to frame and put on a wall. She told Chloe that forgiveness was not something she could earn through actions or gestures, that it was something Olivia might eventually choose to give for her own peace of mind, not because Chloe deserved it. That is genuinely one of the most emotionally intelligent things I have ever heard someone say to a person who wronged them. She did not slam the door, she did not make promises she couldn't keep, and she did not let Chloe turn her guilt into Olivia's problem to solve. That is therapy working in real time, and I am genuinely impressed. But then the mother escalates, and oh my goodness does she escalate. She calls Olivia and tells her that her health is suffering because of the family divide, and implies that if something happens to her, it will be Olivia's fault. I need to sit with that for a moment. Olivia's mother took her own health condition and pointed it at her daughter like a weapon. That is not a mother advocating for family unity. That is emotional manipulation at an advanced level. And the fact that she then told Olivia she used to be sweet and forgiving, and that this situation had made her cold. Olivia did not become cold. Olivia became boundaried. Those are two very different things, and the fact that her mother cannot tell the difference is deeply telling. Olivia's response to that was perfect, by the way. She told her mother she hadn't changed. She had simply learned to value herself enough not to accept mistreatment. I genuinely wanted to applaud. You cannot guilt someone into forgiving a betrayal by making their healing about your feelings. You just cannot. Now the grandmother. I did not see her coming, and she was a breath of fresh air in this entire story. She took Olivia to lunch, told her she was handling the situation with remarkable maturity, and then dropped the information that Olivia's mother had once been in a similar situation herself and had chosen to forgive, which apparently had eaten away at her for years. So the mother's frantic pushing for reconciliation is not just about family harmony. It is about her own unresolved wounds being projected onto her daughter. That does not excuse the behavior, but it does contextualize it in a way that is genuinely useful. The grandmother understood that forgiveness is a personal choice that should never be demanded or rushed, and I wish she had been in every single one of those phone calls Olivia had to endure. The small claims court detail, he did not contest it. Ethan, the man who used a joint credit card to fund a secret affair with his girlfriend's sister, did not contest the claim when taken to court over it, and that money went into Olivia's moving fund. That is not just justice, that is poetic. The funds he spent trying to build something secret ended up paying for Olivia to build something new. I genuinely love that for her. The wedding encounter with Ethan is also worth mentioning because Olivia watching him watch her dance with Adrian and feeling nothing, not anger, not sadness, just pure indifference, that is what moving on actually looks like. Not performing happiness, not dramatic confrontation, just genuine emotional neutrality towards someone who no longer takes up space in your life. Now morally, and I want to be very clear about this, the pressure Olivia's mother put on her throughout this entire process is its own form of harm. Betrayal does not only come from people who lie to your face. It also comes from people who are supposed to protect you choosing instead to prioritize their own comfort and their own narrative over your well-being. Every phone call asking Olivia to be the bigger person was a small additional betrayal. Every guilt trip about family unity was a message that Chloe's peace of mind mattered more than Olivia's healing. That is not a mother protecting her daughter. That is a mother protecting her idea of what her family should look like. Chloe moving back in with her parents, Ethan accusing her of using him to get back at Olivia, losing her friends, losing her apartment, losing her reputation. She did not just lose Olivia, she lost the version of herself that people respected. And the most heartbreaking part is that she did it chasing something that was never going to make her feel better because the real issue was never Ethan. The real issue was a lifetime of comparison and jealousy that she never dealt with. Ethan was just the most destructive expression of it. Olivia's closing line is the one I keep coming back to though. Chloe wanted what she had, took her boyfriend and lost her sister, her friends, and her integrity. Olivia lost a boyfriend and a sister, but gained clarity about who she is and what she deserves. And then she said, when I look at it that way, I know who really won. And she is absolutely right. She really did. Thank you so much for tuning in to Anonymous Diary and following along with Olivia's story from beginning to end. This one was a lot, and I genuinely hope you are okay after all 3 parts, because that was an emotional journey and a half. If you made it all the way to the end, I really do appreciate you sticking around. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like, because it genuinely helps more than you know, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a new story. The comment section is open, and I would love to know what you think. Are you Team Olivia all the way? Do you think she should eventually forgive Chloe? Do you think the mother's behavior was just as bad as the betrayal itself? Let me know everything. I read every single comment, and your opinions genuinely make these videos so much better. Thank you again for being here. I will see you in the next one.